investing in to improve the digital experiences within K2. Our SmartForms designer has been around for quite a while, allowing forms designers to easily generate and design web-based forms based on our patented Smart Object technology. I'm excited to show you some of the features we're working on to allow for better extensibility of the design experience, particularly in the cloud. For our on-prem customers, extensibility points have always been in the DNA of K2 Platform. If you can't do something out of the box, chances are you can extend the platform beyond even K2's wildest dreams. We've got upcoming features that range from built-in designer enhancements to easily changing theme elements. We also are looking at adding external components such as JavaScript or CSS files or web components if you're a developer who's always felt limited by our no-code forms designer. Hopefully, one or more of these topics will pique your interest for this session. Before we get into the features that we are planning to deliver for the digital experiences, let's take a look at how we prioritize features. There have been lots of customer ideas logged about improvements to end-user experiences, both from design time and runtime. There's been requests for more control over layouts from a pixel-perfect perspective, setting widths on tables by pixels, or letting columns auto-resize for a responsive experience. We also have requests for enhanced branding functionality to satisfy the brand police and opening up extensibility points so that we can have as many controls as we want. We've definitely heard the feedback and we are listening to everything that is logged to the ideas portal. As we look at the hundreds of ideas that have been logged to the portal, we step back and think about who the people are who are really using K2 software. We've come up with several personas, including one for the designer, so that we can look beyond the end user experience and take this persona into account when we're adding features to enable developers and designers to customize experiences for your needs. So let's take a look at some of these personas. The lifecycle of user experiences range from the business analyst who can model out information necessary for a user to do their task, to the developer or designer who can extend experiences with unlimited possibilities. The power of the K2 platform has always been its extensibility points, which empowers the professional developers to push the limits of K2 and create things that, while we may not have dreamed of, it's definitely possible because if you can code it, you can do it. While allowing these extensions, we also want to make sure that the created components are surfaced in the K2 designers so that the full spectrum of personas involved with K2 solutions could take advantage of the components being coded once and reused everywhere. On the left-hand side, we've got Paul, the business analyst, who is taking the requirements for the interfaces and building out SmartForms or using the generation tools to get started quickly. He can build out exactly what he needs to functionally work with no code and low complexity. In some organizations, there may be a design group who can help make all the websites and forms pretty and follow all branding standards. In this case, Julie can build on top of Paul's forms and apply themes or CSS styling to freshen up the interfaces. She may also have experience with controls and templates that can help the flow of applications work across any device. Once Paul and Julie have exhausted their skills, you can always count on Henrik, the developer, to come in and really extend K2. Using his core strengths of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, Henrik can build extensions like custom controls that can be added to a K2 environment, so the next time Paul or Julie need that functionality, they can add the custom control in the designer rather than asking Henrik to code it another time. This back and forth collaboration between the business analyst and the developer, with the branding and designer skills to help make everything modern and beautiful, is really what will make the next generation of K2 user interfaces shine. As we talked about these three personas, we've got Paul on the left as the business analyst using the no-code modeling tools, and Henrik on the right using custom code to really extend the K2 platform. Obviously, as we extend things and we move into more technical features, then the complexity increases, but so does the capability. So we really feel that it is a continual spectrum of working together collaboratively to build out the K2 solutions using the tools that are familiar to you and the web standards that are also familiar so that you can build out K2 solutions to be even more powerful than ever before. So let's start with Paul. Think of him as you. Paul is you if you are a business analyst who's been tasked with creating a K2 solution. Paul knows the business process and has to model out what needs to happen. We want to add features to the K2 designer so that Paul doesn't always have to drop to Julie or Henrik to get assistance. So I want to show off a few of the features that have been recently released in the cloud or will be in the next on-prem release. And this will also kind of set the stage for Julie and Henrik to step in and flex their skills. So, as you've seen in Burley's keynote session, the business process we're working with is a claims processing app for the Denalics Insurance Company. In this scenario, if a claimant has an accident, they need to easily file a claim so that Denalics can review it, go through any necessary steps, and then pay the claimant. So, with this in mind, Paul has, met with all of the stakeholders and has built out, the requirements for this solution and is ready to get started building out some of the forms used in this process. So let's jump into the K2 Designer so that Paul can start working on his forms for the claims process. We've got a couple smart objects that are created to store information about the claim and the involved parties in this claim. This data could link into other systems like CRM or legacy databases for contact information. Very quickly, though, I can generate a view based on this smart object to easily see all of the data captured throughout this process. I'm going to create an editable list just so that I can see all of the data in the claim and make any updates that I need to. Think of this as like an admin view. And I can also generate a form for that to be displayed on. You'll see there's some sensible defaults that when I have selected what kind of form I want to create, that it has some behaviors that are checked by default. So we're trying to make this as quick and easy to get going with a smart form, and I can click OK. So this will generate the views in the form for me. It'll be checked out to me so that I can edit it as needed. And I'm going to go ahead and run this editable list. So you'll see that all of the data that's already in that smart object, so remember this could be coming from third-party systems, is going to be displayed for me, as well as all of those defaults that I had selected where I can add rows, edit, save, I can refresh this. This is a very quick and easy way to model out interfaces that you need as part of your business process. So Paul could do this with literally 5 clicks, and he's up and running with his interfaces. So now that he's created kind of an admin interface for all of the claims, let's create a user input form. So I can go back to my category, and I can create a new view. I'm going to design it this time rather than have the system automatically generate it for me. And I'm going to call this the involved parties form. This is going to be an item view because it's going to be used to capture information rather than list out multiple rows. And I'm going to create my view. So the K2 Designer is going to give me an empty view that I can go ahead and start building out my interface. I'm going to create a layout table to store my information. I do have some design skills, so I'm going to change the format of this cell to make it a little bit different. Let's make it maybe a light gray just so that it's shaded a little bit differently than the rest of the columns. And I'm going to add some more rows below. Probably about 6, that sounds good. I can merge some of these cells together, so I want my layout to kind of have a different width on these cells here. Great. And then I have a full toolbox of controls that I can drag on for my input. So I know I'm going to need to capture some input from the claimant. So let's drag out a couple of text boxes. But that's not dragging my labels on with me, and it's not setting these up with a field because you know what? I forgot to map a data source. So let's pick out my involved parties smart object. Once I've wired that out and I go back to my layout, I'll notice now all of the fields and methods are wired up to this view so I can easily drag on the smart object data that I want to be captured in that field, and it will automatically map it for me. So you'll see now the field is already mapped. I've got all of my wiring that is necessary for the smart object to save the data from this form. If I keep dragging on other fields though, because I know what the field is and the label with that, which matches the smart object field, those labels come with me. So I can quickly and just drag on the rest of these fields, and I'll probably need, whoops, drag that over there, probably need another couple of labels over here because I did not drag those on. This one will be title, and this one will be, oops, this one will be first name. All right, so I've got my input fields all set up. I am now going to drag over a couple of buttons here. So if I take my save button, actually I want create because this is a new claimant. So I'm going to have my create button over here. Then maybe I also want to have a cancel button if I've changed my mind on this screen. So I can drag on this one and call it cancel. So now that I've got kind of the layout and all of my fields on here, I can do a little bit of styling. So for the K2 designer, we have added in some functionality on the table control that I want to point out really quickly. We have the ability to now set the column widths by either dragging or by typing in a specific pixel value if I want. I can also then take another column and I can mix the values here and say that should be 50% of the space. So I can make this column 50%, and if I want to leave the last column as auto, that means it will resize automatically to fit all available space on the screen. So this will help with responsive layouts, and it will also help really get you pixel perfect widths on your columns. Under the scenes, we have changed the rendering of this table control to no longer render as HTML tables for layouts. Instead, it will all be using divs and grid layouts. So this has been a modernization exercise for SmartForms. We're very excited, and this will be part of the next release. All right, I'm gonna format that one over here. The other thing that we've added is we've added style properties to labels. So we've given some out-of-box styles based on the themes that I can choose, and it's gonna give me some default styling. We have done some engineering work to really clean up the themes and the styles, to use variables, and to also use industry standard HTML labels like H1, or you saw paragraph in there. All of this has really been done in an effort to help make styling consistently across all controls a lot easier when you bring in someone like Julie to help with the styling. So we've got styling on labels that I can pick. We've also got styling on buttons. So I can make this be a main action because this is the button I want them to click. And this one I can style to be destructive because that may, gives a visual indication that we are going to do something here. All right, so I realized that I have left off these checkboxes, which are also important for my interface. So I'm going to add in another row, and I'm going to move my buttons a little bit further down and drag on these two checkboxes. Now these are yes, no fields, so they have a true or false value. And I also will notice that, checkboxes maybe is not the experience that I want the end user to see. I want this to be a little bit more user friendly. So this is where Paul now has the interface set up as close to what he wants as possible, but really is going to need to tag in a designer to help build out the visual experience that he wants for end users to experience. So if I click finish though on this view and run it really quickly, what you'll be able to see though is Paul in a matter of minutes has been able to create an interface. There's a little bit of styling, right? Out of box, no code styling, and has built out the interface with all of the fields that need to be captured by the claimant for this insurance claim, and is now ready to ask Julie for help styling this. So let's step into Julie's shoes. This is Julie. Think of her as you. She is you if you are someone who is a UX or UI designer or a front end developer and really wants to have end users to have a memorable experience. So, in order to help Julie make these beautiful user experiences, we're focusing on a set of features that build up dynamic themes, which allows you to easily change color schemes for your application. So Julie's very familiar with style guides, and as a lot of corporate branding initiatives produce these style guides, they really have a goal of ensuring brand consistency. They want to give a sense of identity across all of the company's sites and forms, and are pretty much general practice these days. Gone are letterheads and logo only designs. Now, style guides have fonts and colors and verbs and emotions to evoke, and iconography and dark and light color palettes. If your organization does not have a style guide, there are plenty of design systems out there, from Microsoft's Fluent Design to Material or Adobe Spectrum. All of these are guidelines out there to really assist you with making consistent and delightful user experiences. So, how do you translate your corporate style guide into the K2 platform? That's where the dynamic themes come in. So in the previous demo, Paul had set up the smart objects in the smart forms and taken them as far as he could with no code in the designer. Julie now has the task of taking these forms and making the user experience into something much more user friendly and modern. So let's take a look at what it looks like after she's got her hands on it. So now we're looking at the Denalics Insurance Claims app after Julie has gotten her hands on it and made some styling changes. I'm going to point out a couple of features that we will talk about later on in this session, so just hang tight, but I want to give you a reference point for when we talk about them later. So this forms experience takes advantage of a couple of custom controls. We've got this kind of wizard step control over across the top that lets you navigate through your app, as well as having some additional custom controls like this Google Maps control. If you're at all familiar with Google Maps, this is the Static Maps API. It's a web component that we have merely wrapped with some JSON and have been able to import into the K2 designer. So we'll talk about this more in depth in a little bit when we visit Henrik and talk about custom controls, but remember this map. On the involved parties step, you'll see that this is the same form that Paul built. It is just styled differently so that it looks more modern. We have the same fields of title, first name, last name, date of birth, and address. We also have the injured and fatality checkboxes down here. Now, these have been styled to look as switches, which are much easier to deal with on a phone or a tablet. They have a larger hit area for your finger. The view that you need to fill out also has this shadow around it. So it really gives this kind of depth and this feeling that I am filling out an application. And it's a visually more beautiful form than the out-of-box smart forms. Additionally, we've got this idea of dark mode. So if we have users that are more comfortable in dark mode, they have a better user experience this way, we can support it just by switching out style variables and everything responds to this mode. So if I look at my map control, this is also now in dark mode. All of my controls have been styled into dark mode as well so that I still have the same experience. And what about if I am filling this out on a phone? What does this experience look like? If I switch over to my dev tools and just kind of mimic this in an iPhone, you'll see that it honors the same controls. We've got the same dark mode. It responds to dark or light mode. And we have that map control also that will be able to say, where am I? Where did the accident happen? And I can select it. And this works either on the phone or in my browser. So what we're really focusing on is having a consistent end user experience with the ability to style the out-of-box smart forms into something that's going to fit with corporate branding initiatives and make sure that all of your applications are beautiful and fit within your corporate brand. So I want to make one note here. Everything that Julie just did to style up those smart forms can be done today. This can all be done in a K2 trial environment or in your cloud environments today. So the features that we are working on adding to the dynamic theme are really to make this easier for Julie to create these in a central location and have them be reusable rather than having to code each behavior on each form every time. So now that we've seen that possibility, these are some mock-ups and how this could be exposed in the design experience. So once Julie has kind of come up with her color schemes or she has her branding guidelines, she can create a style profile for her app. So if I look at this style, you'll see that Julie sets 5 main colors that we use in the theme. And based on these 5 colors, we can generate around 150 shades to use to fit your branding style guide. You'll see over here that all of these are really set to auto, which means that we will generate those so that we will give you your best experience for your forms. And really, you only have to set these 5 colors. Now I can overwrite these. I can have complete control over that if I want. I can also have control over how controls are rendered. So remember I pointed out the label styles and the button styles. I can also set those properties here if I want to change what that destructive button looks like or what that input label looks like. All of that can be done in the designer, and behind the scenes, the style profile just uses industry web standards for CSS variables. That way it is passed through to the designer as well as runtime forms. So once Julie has set up this style profile, then it is available for use in all of the apps. You'll see here that the Denalic style is now selected for this form. And as Julie or Paul builds out new experiences, Those variables are passed through to the designer so that you see exactly what your form is going to look like in a true WYSIWYG experience. So this was a little look at some of the features that we're adding to make Julie's life a little easier and be able to do branding and styling on SmartForms. Let's visit now Henrik. Think of him as you. Henrik is you if you are a professional developer who's comfortable coding JavaScript and CSS and has built out user interfaces from scratch using HTML and some common UX frameworks. And Henrik has always been frustrated you can't just right click drop to code in the SmartForms designer. So if we look at how we can help Henrik extend SmartForms, one thing that we can do is extend the styles and behaviors beyond what Julie can do out of the box with a style profile. So we are introducing the SmartForms SDK, and really this is going to be a collection of features to help make the professional developer's job a little bit easier in extending SmartForms. The first step in this SmartForms SDK is extending styles and behaviors through CSS and JavaScript. So let's take a little bit deeper look into that. So we can really build out things as we've seen with Paul in a rapid manner to prototype out what interfaces should look like. Let's say Paul has built out this dashboard and really he did his best. Paul's skills have advanced a little bit. He's got some icons in here and it's starting to look pretty good. But he knows that if he gives Henrik a little bit of time, Henrik can turn this interface into a showstopper. And all Henrik has done is injected CSS and JavaScript into that out-of-box SmartForm dashboard to really change how the runtime experience looks. So Henrik has found that the Swiss Army knife of SmartForms is a hidden data label. And by putting these hidden data labels and changing the properties to be literal, he can inject CSS and JavaScript directly into the page. So this has some really powerful options. I mean, if you can code it, you can do it, but it's a little bit hard to manage because each of these data labels has their own literal CSS or JavaScript behind it. So if Henrik's working with another developer and they're trying to, work quickly and prototype some of these things, it can be hard to troubleshoot on where exactly that customization has been done, if something needs to be changed, which data label was it in. It can be hard to manage. So the SmartForms SDK is really aimed at taking those code snippets that I would originally have put into a data label and instead let the developer externalize that for their own custom CSS files or JavaScript files. These can be hosted wherever they need to be on their corporate intranet or Azure or a CDN and link them into your SmartForms. We will then take those CSS and JavaScript files and we will put them into the runtime HTML of the SmartForms in the appropriate location so that styles are loaded in the head and behaviors are loaded in the body. And this way, Henrik and the other developers can manage their code outside of SmartForms. It's not hidden in a data label. It can be part of source code control. And anytime they make a change to that behavior, it's going to be reflected everywhere that that is used in all of the user experiences for a more consistent and manageable and honestly more maintainable experience. So this is something that is really focused on the developer's experience in extending the SmartForms using the SmartForms SDK. The first step here is just about CSS and JavaScript, but we are looking at other extensibility points. So if you have any feedback that you would like for this or features that you would like to vote up, make sure you go out to the ideas forum and log those and vote for them. The second extensibility point for the professional developer is custom controls. So we're very excited to announce this ability to create custom controls for your K2 environment. This has always been possible with our on-prem product, but it required you copying DLLs to the server, restarting the K2 service, all things that you don't have access to do as a cloud customer. So continuing with our theme of using industry standard technologies and extending the K2 cloud environments, this custom control framework will use web components, which is a set of web platform APIs that allow you to create new encapsulated HTML tags to use in web pages and web apps. SmartForms is really just a web page. So we can use these custom components built on those standards that work across all modern browsers and can be used with any JavaScript library or framework that works with HTML, except that in the day, SmartForms is HTML. This also lets Henrik build the web components in the technologies that are most familiar to him. So maybe he's an expert with Angular or React based controls. Henrik can bring those into the control toolbox. And since it's built on our reusable framework, these controls can be shared amongst other applications as well as integrated into the marketplace. So let's take a little look into how this experience will be. So we have a number of controls that are available for Forms Designer to use when building out smart forms. We've got input and display controls. You saw some of them as Paul was building out his forms for the claims management. We have had at least 200 ideas, though, that have been logged to the idea forums around controls to add to the toolbox or enhancements. So rather than chip away at this list, probably a little bit slower than you or Henrik would like, we are investing in this framework to make it easy to wrap web components and add them to your K2 environment. So when Paul's designing his form, he has this toolbox of controls, but something's missing. He needs to have a way to get an address using a map. So Paul can go out to the community controls in the marketplace and do a search and see that there's some controls out here that some of them have been built either by Henrik already, or these have been built by partners or other people in the K2 community to really help build out that toolbox and get really great user experience with custom controls. So if Paul comes out here and searches and doesn't really find the control that he needs, he can always go ask his buddy Henrik. Henrik can go search GitHub or search, any code repository that he wants to find the control that does exactly what he wants. And he'll wrap it with the necessary metadata to understand so that SmartForms can understand what the control should do. These are very early preview screens, so they may change, but the concept is that I can drag my control package into K2. K2 will analyze the control package and make sure that everything is described properly and let you control the click. So what was in that zip file though that I dragged on? It's the JSON description of your component, including the metadata to describe where the control displays. It links to the JavaScript file that describes the control and its properties and methods. You can describe what properties you want to display at design time so that Paul can set those properties when he uses this. And once it's uploaded to your environment, this custom control is registered and visible for all designers to use across the applications. And if there are changes made to the control, then it'll be reflected everywhere that that control is used. So again, we are reusing custom code, but in a managed way so that all applications that need that functionality can use this control. And by Henrik coding it once and installing it into the K2 environment, then all of the no-code design experiences now have that extensibility point. So if I'm back as Paul and I now see that that map control has been added, I can easily add it to my application. So the last investment area that I want to cover briefly in this session is our path forward for end user experiences, whether they're mobile or browser based. Having that consistent user experience has really become commonplace in this digital remote workforce that we all live in and work in and school in. And it is more and more important as we move forward. So let's talk a little bit about progressive web apps. Burley mentioned in his keynote something that we've really been watching from a technology roadmap perspective, and it's getting some traction. Google announced PWA support in 2015, and it kind of stayed in the land of Google for quite a while. Microsoft and Apple adopted PWA guidelines in 2018, and from there, traction's really taken hold in the market. We've been doing some analysis and watching the features and functionality described in the PWA spec, and we're excited about the possibilities it can bring to the platform. Progressive web apps is really a set of technologies that allows a website to have access to native mobile functionality. So using standard web technologies like JavaScript and HTML, it runs directly in a browser like a standard website, but it can be installed to run full screen without the browser Chrome so that the end user thinks they're in a native mobile app. Installed PWAs are automatically updated when the website is updated, so the management of apps is a simple task. Currently, there is not functionality to distribute PWAs through MDM software, but as traction keeps growing and as progressive web apps become more and more commonplace, we really feel that the MDM software vendors will jump on board and support that as well. Behind the scenes, service workers will run in the background to enable that platform integration. So maybe we are caching all of those smart forms local to the device or all of that smart object data. So I can work offline. And then once I'm back online, I can connect out to the network and really upload all of my changes. Or push notifications can also be handled by that service worker. While we've had native mobile apps with this functionality for a while, we haven't had the ability to have this in the browser. So we want to have a common user experience with notifications and offline and draft capabilities no matter which device that you are working with. We've been tinkering around with some service workers and bringing in PWA support into our new app model. It's still early days, but watch for more information around this as we start to preview some of this functionality around PWA and the common user experiences. So, if you're ready to learn more about the features you've seen here today, there's a couple of options for you. If you are new to K2, you can sign up for a K2 trial at k2.com/tryk2, and you'll get access to the latest software release to begin your journey with K2. All of the solutions that I showed you today can be built on trial today. We will be publishing documentation on how you can build out that scenario and really get some of that branding and changes into your SmartForms experience. So watch for information to be published later. If you're an existing K2 customer and you already have been using the SmartForms Designer and you really want to get your hands on some of these new features that'll be coming out like custom controls, you can sign up for the preview programs at k2.com/preview, where we will be in touch with information about getting access to sandbox environments or how to get that into your environment to begin playing with the new features just as soon as they're ready.